You're listening to an AINC original podcast. We believe you don't have to do life without a compass. Let us be your guide on this amazing journey. Welcome to Navigating Life with Vision Loss.
Hello and welcome to Navigating Life with Vision Loss. I'm your host, Kim Wardlow, and this program is brought to you by the Audio Information Network of Colorado. In April, our topic is housing. Last week, we talked about buying or selling a home, and this week, we're talking about renting and everything renting. And our guest is Candy Kristen. So we will be back in just a moment with her and talk about what you need to know if you're not looking to buy but looking to rent.
This is Navigating Life with Vision Loss. If you have a question, please visit us at aincolorado.org/podcast-guest. Make sure to subscribe to all of our podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. And now, here's your host, Kim Wardlow.
So welcome back. Candy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Well, would you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself? I know that Jonathan, our podcast producer, said you're a rock star in rentals and purchasing and property management. But if you want to share a little bit about yourself, if there's a fun fact about yourself, or maybe even how you got into the real estate business.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. And Jonathan is so kind for calling me a rock star. I don't know if I'd give myself that label, but I'll take it if he's wanting to give it to me. Well, I started back as a child, and I know that sounds very cliche of saying, oh, I've been doing this my whole life. And I can also attest that I legitimately have. And so can Jonathan. He has known me a very large portion of my adolescent years. It all started back when my mother came home and told my father that she had purchased a fourplex without him knowing. He was quite shocked back in 1971 to hear that is what my mother did. But that is how they got started, and was with a fourplex in the Denver metro area. And I don't want to say the rest is history because there's a lot of in between there. But I started literally when I was in my mommy's tummy of just, mom renting out properties and going and helping them paint rental properties when I was younger, removing trash, getting properties rehabilitated for new tenants. And that is how I started. Now I can say as an adult, I've been doing it on my own as an adult for the last 17 years. And I have learned a lot. And I'm very blessed that my mother has actually very much promoted me and given me some waiters and some life vests, and also just given me the right guidance of helping me as a young adult to make wise real estate investments and property management. All due to, I can say, my mom starting at a young age with me.
Well, that's great. And what an interesting and productive thing to share with your mom growing up, learning that business.
Yes. Yes. Very, very blessed.
Yeah, that's a gift.
It was. Mm-hmm. And as an adolescent, I did not realize it was a gift. And now as an adult, I can see the gift that she gave me of giving me a business mindset. And I'm very grateful for that.
So for our listeners that may be looking at renting an apartment, a house, where do you suggest that they start? And obviously, I know you realize that most of our listeners have some level of vision loss, so they're also navigating websites that might not be super accessible, and those types of things. So, do you have any guidance of where they should start to find reputable sources for rental properties?
Sure. So I would start with finding an advocate for yourself. I work with multiple adult advocates, and I'm sure this is something that your listeners are probably familiar with. Ensuring that you have somebody with your best interest in mind, and that could be in the form of a possible real estate agent. There are leasing agents that can advocate for you, and how they get paid is by sharing a cooperation fee with the listing agent for that property manager, or with that property management company. A lot of those property managers have a co-op fee that pays those adult advocates, as a real estate agent. The other way is, I'm sure that your listeners are probably familiar with the resources that the county that they live in has different co-ops that will also help them find an adult advocate. And that's where I would start. And that adult advocate should be able to assist in finding some of the resources. If it's the Our Center that is in Longmont, I work with them frequently. I also work with other Section 8 housing locations that make sure that the individuals that are seeking housing can find something within their budget and give them a little bit of a boost if needed.
Well, thank you for that. I was not aware myself that you could have an advocate for renting. I'm familiar with when you're purchasing, working with a real estate agent, but I had never thought about working with a leasing agent.
Absolutely.
So that's very good advice.
Absolutely.
What should individuals expect in the application process?
That is a good question. So the application process, most landlords are going to want to make sure that you, as an individual, pay your bills and mind the law, because that's exactly what you're going to be working with your landlord over the next 6, 12, 18 months, whatever term your lease is. A landlord does not want to deal with an individual that is defiant or doesn't pay their bills. So making sure that you have a clean background check, meaning if you do have criminal history, landlords are required within the state of Colorado to take each case on a case-by-case basis. So they have to find out if that individual does have some sort of negative mark on their criminal history. What is that rehabilitation process that individual has gone through? Have they received therapy? Do they have reputable sources for giving them a kind of like a referral, and a personal and a professional referral, and maybe even writing a letter of, hey, this incident happened 5 years ago, and I am not the same person that I was 5 years ago. And these were the steps that I took to ensure that I learned from that process, that scenario, that situation that happened. So that is the first thing that I would do when it comes to that piece of it. And of course, I'm not a legal attorney, nor do I represent anyone in your show with that, but that's just from a property management standpoint here in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
Now for the credit information, very similar. A lot of property managers, they are allowed to take that information again on a case-by-case basis. Some property managers say, I don't want to speak to anybody or rent to anybody that has no credit. For myself and the properties that I manage, I would rather rent to somebody who has no credit than somebody who has bad credit, because no credit, they haven't had a chance to prove anything yet. Bad credit, somebody's already proven to me that they are bad at paying their bills. So
Right.
I would suggest, again, with the adult advocate that you may decide to use, if you do have some credit or criminal situations that you need to work through and process with a landlord, that you make sure that you possibly have a backup plan of a reputable individual that can maybe co-sign with you and have some good credit and good criminal history that can advocate for you.
If you have good credit and your background check is going to be clean, is there anything else folks should be aware of or on the lookout for as they're applying for a rental property?
Something that landlords want to know is, how many pets do you have with you? And be honest about it. I am certain that there is a large population of your audience that definitively has a service animal that they need. There are also individuals that lie about that, as we all know. And so if you do have a pet, it's going to make it much easier on your renting experience if you're just very honest, very transparent, and you disclose everything up front versus trying to sneak around the fact that you have 5 pets that need to come with you. It'll make it a very big struggle throughout the time of your lease if you are not honest about that up front. So honesty is always the best policy, as your mother's probably told you, but even more so in the living situation that you are seeking. Make sure that you are transparent about all of the individuals, including your pets, that are going to be living with you.
Could a landlord actually deny somebody just if they have a guide dog, as opposed to, I realize some properties do not allow pets, but restaurants do not allow pets either, but guide dogs, they must make an exception for that. Is that true as well for rental properties?
I wouldn't be comfortable answering that.
Okay.
Sorry. It's a good question.
That's okay.
That's a good question. I just wouldn't be, since I'm not an attorney that specializes in ADA. Yeah, I wouldn't be. Just be transparent. That's the biggest thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. What are the pros and cons? If I know it's possible to rent from a property management company, but then there are also individual owners of properties that it's possible to rent directly from the owner. And what are pros and cons of those two options?
Certainly. So larger property management companies typically have more of a system in place and policies in place that they generally stick to. And so it really is dependent on the individual and what the individual's preferences are. Property management companies are going to have more of a systemized guideline of how and what they do with their processes. And the reason for that is because they're handling a larger quantity of properties. And so therefore they have to have consistency and kind of fitting properties into their system and their process. They generally can't take properties that, have a whole bunch of unique individual. I'm not saying they won't. I'm just saying there's usually more consistency with a property management, a larger property management company. Now, renting directly from an owner, again, there's, with every choice, there's benefits and there's losses. With renting directly from an owner, you might have an individual that can work around some maybe more unique circumstances, and that can make more accommodations. Also, there is a possibility that you might be working with an individual that is not as experienced in the real estate realm, and a property owner, any sort of landlord or anybody that is renting or managing property here in Colorado, they all have to stick to the same set of rules and regulations. No matter if you are an individual managing your own property versus a large property management company. And so an individual may not have all of the experience to understand all of those rules and guidelines that the Colorado Board of Real Estate has implemented into their requirements. So that's just something to keep in mind. And I'm not saying that property management companies are going to know everything and stick to everything. I'm just saying, as a generalization, an individual landlord may not have as much knowledge as a professional property management company when it comes to those guidelines.
So it might even be advisable for a person, if they are looking at renting a property offered by the individual owner, to have a conversation and ask them, is that appropriate to ask them how long they've been renting properties and their experience?
Oh, that's absolutely an appropriate conversation. And just because they say, well, this is my first time doing it, don't be shy away from that. Like I said, for me and my personal experience, as a professional, I like to give individuals chances. And so, giving an individual that might be a first-time landlord, just have an open conversation with them. Again, going back to that disclosure and being transparent of, so many of the issues involved with a tenant landlord relationship can really be resolved by just good communication.
So many things seem to be resolved with good communication. Yes. So that's always good advice. Could you talk a little bit about the pros and cons of renting in general? Last week we talked about purchasing a property and just looking at the rental landscape right now in Colorado. When does it make sense for a person to rent, and perhaps they should be looking at purchasing instead?
Absolutely. So, as we all, grow as adults, we all learn that every choice has benefits and losses. One of the benefits of renting is that you have a landlord or a property management company that is going to be managing and taking care of the majority of your maintenance issues. So if you have some sort of maintenance scenario that occurs, you just have one phone call and one point of contact, generally speaking. Again, not always across the board, but speaking in generalities, generally speaking, you are going to just communicate directly with your property management company if and when you have a maintenance problem. And then that maintenance and property management company, it is their responsibility to manage that maintenance issue. Now, if it's a leaky faucet, that's not as large of a project versus if you discover that your furnace goes out in the middle of January,
Right.
especially here in Colorado.
I know.
So
I've had that happen.
Yes, it is not pleasant. And
No.
the benefits of having a property management company or a landlord and renting is you have an individual to essentially take that mental load and that mental stress of figuring out all of those moving pieces and parts of getting the contractor there. If it is January and your furnace goes out, making sure that you're supplied with space heaters. And if space heaters aren't available, getting you a backup plan for either heat or a different dwelling to reside in while those projects are being handled. So that is the benefit. And the cons or the loss of renting is what I believe is the obvious of not building equity, especially here in Colorado, of, the equity that has, and the prices of properties, how they have just exponentially increased, more specifically over the last 5 to 7 years, and even more generally speaking, the last 10 years here along the Front Range, and really in the entirety of Colorado, all of those property prices have substantially increased. And then knowing what the rental industry looks like right now in Colorado. So again, Colorado has different geographical regions, as I'm sure as every state does. There's the Front Range of, Denver, Boulder, Fort Collins, and Colorado Springs. And then you kind of flesh out a little bit greater of, the high country and the mountains and the western slope versus the eastern plains. Colorado is very diversified. So I can't speak directly of, or definitively for the entire state. But what I can tell you is where the larger populations are, along that concentrated Front Range area, rentals are still in very high demand. As of late this past March, that was the end of Q1, we have not seen rental prices decrease. Our property prices, our list prices, we are still getting we were getting over 100% of asking price in years past, and not even just in years, just 10 months ago, we were getting over asking price. And now we're settling down to more of like a 96 to 97% ish closing price versus list price. But the rental landscape, those rental rates have not seemed to be affected even in this small recession that we're experiencing right now.
Well, I know from talking to listeners and older adults, in general, we work with a lot of older adults, that affordable housing is always an issue, and trying to find if rentals that are affordable.
Yes.
And that seems like that's continuing to be an issue.
It is. And what is happening from the economic journals that I am reading is that inflation is just increasing at such a substantial rate, and our income is not keeping up with those inflation costs. Right now, I currently volunteer on the housing authority in my own community out here in Eastern Colorado. And I will tell you that waiting list for our affordable housing is a mile long, and it does not get any shorter. It just,
Right.
people it's in such high demand because of the uniqueness of our economy right now.
Well, it's hard to give a lot of hope in that area, since that's something that we've seen as an ongoing issue. But if a person is able to find an apartment, a house that they're renting, what are their rights when it comes to renting? You touched on home repairs.
Mm-hmm.
What should a person expect the landlord to do? You know, what if they want the walls a different color? You know, what would they need to seek permission for, or expect to do themselves versus what the landlord would be doing?
So it mostly depends on what is negotiated upfront in that lease and in the contract terms when you first rent a property. There are a lot of property owners who maybe want to lease you the property, and in those leases, there are a lot of flexibility on who manages the repairs. Sometimes it is the tenant themselves. Most frequently, what I see in the leases that I negotiate for my clients, I see that a landlord has a property that they have presented to them in a clean and tidy way, and they want that property to look the same way, in the same condition, and the same quality when that lease term ends. So if you are wanting to add color to your life and want to paint your walls bright orange, green, or purple, that is something you absolutely need to talk to your landlord prior to. And if you are going to get a paint can out, keep in mind that more than likely you will need to restore that wall color back to its original builder beige or white that it was probably handed over to you.
And a person should expect when they first move in that things are depending, not necessarily that carpet gets replaced after each tenant or anything like that, but that things are in, a good condition.
Correct. Yes. And something to, go back to a previous topic that we discussed, protecting yourself as a tenant, making sure that you as a tenant take a lot of photos prior to moving any belongings in, that you do a check-in and check-out sheet. And here in Colorado, landlords have the capability of returning the security deposit after a tenant has left. So on the landlord side, those of you that maybe are property owners, I would suggest making sure that tenant completely vacates the unit prior to doing your final walkthrough. The reason for that is because of many years of my professional experience. You would be amazed at what can be covered up by the perfectly placed moving box or the dolly or the the tarp that was just perfectly placed prior to them leaving. So that's one thing that I would recommend. And then the rent money that you do pay, making sure that you keep track of that and where it gets deposited, and knowing who you are paying I would say is important. And the reason for that is because there have been incidences that I have heard of. It's not happened to me, but just being in the industry, of a person firmly believing that they are renting from the property owner, only to come to find out that that person that they're renting from is not the property owner, and that person is collecting their money, not paying the mortgage, and then all of a sudden they're told that they need to move out and vacate that residence because they were not renting the property legally.
Wow, that would be a horrible shock to have.
Yes. And it has not happened to me personally, but I have heard of it happening on more than one occasion.
Mm-hmm. What about natural disasters? You know, we've had fires, unfortunately, recently. I know we've had flooding at times.
Mm-hmm.
What if there are storms, you know, damage from trees or wind, tornadoes? What are a person's rights if they're renting a property and there's damage from some type of natural disaster?
Sure. So I can actually speak very knowledgeably on this topic because it's fresh in my mind right now. Unfortunately, on February 26th, our family owns a property up in Longmont, Colorado. It was a 16-unit property that had 2 buildings on it, 8 units in one, and these are residential units, 8 residential units in one building, and the other 8 in the other building. Sadly, on February 26th, the property was caught on fire. No malicious intent was done. It was completely by accident. It was a malfunctioning barbecue grill that had caught on fire. And I am in the trenches right now of dealing with all of the different insurance companies. And I will tell you that it is a tragedy to have a front row seat with individuals that you walk life with on a regular basis. And when I say walk life, I mean, these are individuals that I would communicate with on multiple occasions throughout the week or the month of managing that property, and witnessing them lose everything was so hard.
Mm-hmm.
And it was apparent at that moment that in those individuals that do have renter's insurance, that they were able to recover from that natural disaster much easier. And we're still, not even 8 weeks away from that since that incident has happened. But I've been able to witness how the individuals that do have that coverage, how they have been able to get their life back and back on track. And the community, especially one church in particular called The Well, that was right across the road from our property, they really stepped up and just embraced and loved on our tenants who had the big losses. But still, the renter's insurance, I could see the difference in the recovery time for those tenants. And I don't sell renter's insurance. I am not an insurance agent at all. I'm just a property manager that unfortunately had to witness some terrible circumstances in a natural disaster. And I will say that the individuals that with the renter's insurance recovered at a greater rate and faster, more quickly than the others did. So I would recommend renter's insurance.
Because that would enable, obviously, if your building, your home has burned, you're needing to live at least temporarily somewhere else while repairs are made or things are rebuilt. So renter's insurance would provide for some of that where otherwise a landlord would not have any responsibility to help renters necessarily find a temporary housing location.
That is accurate. Yes. Renters, it's very dependent upon the circumstances, but, we as a family that lost that property, I don't want to say, play a victim. However, I will say that we were in sense a victim too, because we had a asset that was lost to a natural disaster, and we are trying to recover from that disaster as well. And it's not the landlord's responsibility to recover everybody else. You have to make sure that you're stabilized and covered to be able to recover.
Yeah, so renter's insurance, something very important to look at, even in circumstances that might not be so extreme, but just to protect
Correct.
Your belongings.
Yes, and some property management companies do require the renter's insurance and proof of renter's insurance. That's something that we didn't do. It was a business decision on our end as to why we didn't, but that is something that some property managers and rental companies do require.
Good to know. Well, Candy, you provided us so much information today and things to think about if a person is looking at renting a property. It's not just so easy as signing a contract and moving in, that there's lots of things to look out for. Would you like to give your contact information so folks would have that?
Yes, I can do that. I guess I can just go ahead and give our office info. Let me make sure, because I've got 2 office numbers. Let me make sure I'm giving the correct one out. So you can contact our rental office if you need any help. 303-834-3145.
Great. Well, again, thanks so much, Candy, for joining us. For our listeners, I hope all of you have gleaned some important information from this. If you're looking at renting a property, or perhaps you have property that you're looking to rent out, I think this is still good information. Next week, we will be talking about how to take care of your home. Please tune in to our other podcasts, Aftersight, Blindsight, and Blind Level Tech. They all provide unique viewpoints and information. I'm really focused on individuals who have vision loss and living life with vision loss. So I invite you to do that. Audio Information Network of Colorado is a nonprofit organization, and our fundraiser, Music Concert in the Dark, will be happening May 4th in conjunction with Rocky Mountain PBS down at the Buell Media Center at their building. You can find more information about that on our website, which is aincolorado.org. You can also contact us via phone if you have any questions, 303-786-7777. Thanks again, and we hope you'll be listening next week.